Good morning, Mets fans, and happy Monday. Welcome to Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and it's been a while since I've recorded a video. As I'd mentioned last week, I was out of town, and I was not able to get into a car to record some thoughts about what's going on in baseball over the last couple of days. But there is some news to report, some activity on the free agent front, and also some activity on the trade front that I missed while I was away. Last week, the Miami Marlins, meet a new team, same as the old team, has broken itself even further of any chance of competing this year. They dealt Christian Yelich to the Milwaukee Brewers, so now the entire Marlins outfield from last year has been traded. They are off of Derek Jeter's books. Good for him. The Major League Baseball Players Association is not real happy about what's happening in Miami. So much so that they've suggested that there be an investigation into what's going on there, which I don't understand. Like, look, if your team doesn't want to compete, oh well. I mean, it is what it is. It's easier to compete against 30 other teams instead of 31 if you're playing in baseball. But a lot of anger amongst Major League Baseball players and owners about what's happening in Miami. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a fan of that team. But the Brewers add Yelich, and they weren't finished after adding Yelich. In fact, the Brewers added free agent Lorenzo Cain. Probably the biggest free agent name signed since the Mets officially signed Jay Bruce. And, you know, the Lorenzo Cain debate, if there is such a thing, was, at least in my mind, did the Brewers overpay for Lorenzo Cain? 5 years, $80 million. And I'm not saying in any capacity that Lorenzo Cain isn't worth that kind of a contract. But what I am saying is that in the current climate, with the way free agents are not being signed, so much so that over the weekend I'd read a rumor that the free agents who have not been signed to any kind of deals are talking about a way to gather as a group and go have their own spring training, almost like a pickup spring training with all of these unsigned free agents taking part in it. But Lorenzo Cain signs with the Brewers. Lorenzo Cain's a great player. Looking at his deal against what the Mets paid for Jay Bruce, I don't think the Mets overpaid. I don't necessarily know that the Brewers overpaid, but I think they could have had Bruce either for less money or fewer years. And I don't know if that's the case, but it seems to me that, I mean, I know if you look at them side by side, Bruce and Cain is actually the better valued player according to WAR. And it's not even close, but I don't know, there's something about an older guy, older center fielder, and again, he's not old, but he will be in 5 years. And what does Lorenzo Cain look like in 5 years? He is a guy who relies on his speed, and we all know what happens with guys who rely on speed as they age. Things don't go well for them traditionally, but you know, you never know. Tip my cap to the Brewers, because that's a nice signing that they made there. With Lorenzo Cain, he would have been a great fit for the Mets, but you know, again, as I always say, we don't know what's really happening behind the scenes. So we don't know if the Mets had conversations with Cain and talked about what he wanted and what he'd be willing to accept, and maybe he wasn't willing to accept the 3-year deal that Jay Bruce signed, 3-year, 48 or whatever it was, that Jay Bruce signed. We don't know. Maybe we'll eventually find out, but right now we don't know. Speaking of the Brewers, former Brewers closer and former Mets closer, Francisco Rodriguez. Yes, K-Rod is still playing, and he's still playing at a pretty high level. K-Rod signed with the Phillies over the weekend. So, another free agent, not necessarily a high-profile free agent, but a free agent nonetheless, comes off the board. I don't know that the Mets were ever considering a reunion with K-Rod, but good for him that he gets a deal to go and play in Philly. Look, the Phillies are on the rise, and they are guaranteed to finish in 4th place. I should say they're guaranteed to finish no lower than 4th place, with the way the Marlins have treated this season upcoming. But the Phillies are on the rise, and K-Rod is a guy who hopefully by this point in his career can mentor younger pitchers and younger bullpen guys. So he's probably a good addition in Philly, so good signing there for them. Back to the Mets. Where do we go from here? What's next? Well, the Mets did pick up their own free agent. Jose Reyes re-signs with the Mets. The signing was pretty clear, pretty straightforward, that at least on the surface, Reyes is not going to be a starter. He's going to be a utility player, a bench player, guy who can spot second base, third base, shortstop, filling in the outfield as needed, be a pinch runner as needed. A relatively inexpensive contract. I think it's a good move for the Mets to bring him back. I think behind Ahmed Rosario, that will make Reyes the second fastest player on the team. And the Mets are severely lacking anything in the speed area. So good to have Reyes back. But it doesn't address the big giant hole at second base right now. To quote one of my favorite movies, Moneyball, I quote it a lot. If a ball is hit the second base, there won't be anyone there to pick it up. Except in Moneyball, it was first base. But second base is a hole right now, and the Mets need to fill it. There are options. There are free agents that are available. Eduardo Nunez's name has been bandied about, but he seems to be pretty wanted by a lot of other teams, which in typical Mets fashion will mean that they won't outbid or even get into a bidding war at all for his services. So perhaps Nunez is off the board for the Mets. We don't know that. But I don't know, I just feel like Neil Walker is coming back. I feel like they're putting the entire team together that made the 2016 postseason run and played the first half of last year in New York. You know, I was listening to Orange and Blue thing from last week, and they made a comment about, or there was a comment about, the Mets are just putting the same team they put on the field last year. And they're putting that together now, and they had such a terrible season last year. And the bottom line is, and I think it was either Darren or Brian who said it, in the preseason last year, and I'm 100% guilty of this, everybody thought the Mets were going to be a 90-win team. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It all came down to, and will always come down to, the pitching and staying on the field. In both cases, we checked both boxes. Negatives. Stay on the field. No, everybody got hurt. Pitching, terrible. Went from what should have been one of the best in the league to the worst in the league. So it's not the worst. It's not the worst case scenario to have the entire 2017 team back in 2018 because you can do a lot worse. Again, assuming these guys can stay on the field and stay healthy. So that's going to, of course, be the key to success in 2018. And I don't know that that's an exclusive thing for the Mets. That might be a thing that all teams like to look at. So that's going to wrap it up for today. I will be recording a couple of videos this week, keeping everybody up to date as to what's going on in Metsville. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions or opinions or whatever about what I've just had to say, or the fact that you missed me for a week, you can reach me on Twitter and follow me at Mr_Met if you're not already doing so. And I thank you for watching very much, and as always, let's go Mets.